Ever since the first cameras were invented, humans have been capturing the absurdity of our world for future generations to remember. Here are 20 fascinating historical pictures that you might find shocking. You'll have to guess which two are last. American Nazis. Before the United States went to war with the Nazis, the country had its very own Nazi Party. Run by far-right political activist George Lincoln Rockwell, the American Nazi Party still survives today in some form. French prisoners of war during the First World War. It's difficult to believe that when World War I kicked off, the French were still sporting vibrant blue uniforms that included bright red pants. This image is one of the few color photos we have that show us exactly what France's troops looked like in the first months of the war. The Boston Marathon and Kathrine Switzer. Kathrine Switzer was the first woman to officially take part in the Boston Marathon. But the race official Jacques Semple didn't want women in his marathon and attempted to remove Switzer's bib, which would have disqualified her. Fashion at the turn of the century. Fashion at the turn of the century was vastly different from what we wear today. Clothing was often made at home and far more modest than what you'd leave your house in today. The fall of Saigon. Desperate civilians crowded the gates of the U.S. Embassy in Saigon as they attempt to flee with American troops. This scene is reminiscent of 2021's fall of Kabul, where tens of thousands of Afghan civilians attempted to flee as American troops withdrew from the country. Gas masks in the First Gulf War. When American and coalition forces were sent to assist Kuwait and push back Iraqi forces in 1991, they were supplied with modern gas masks for fear Saddam Hussein would use his store of chemical weapons against Allied troops. The Children of Auschwitz. A group of children who survived the Auschwitz death camp posed for a picture by Captain Alexander Vorontsov after the camp was liberated by the Soviet Union's Red Army. Hiroshima's aftermath. On August 6, 1945, Hiroshima was the first city to be bombed with a nuclear weapon. There was nothing left after the explosion. The modern world meets King Tut. Archaeologist Howard Carter and an Egyptian worker reveal King Tutankhamun to the world. Shortly after this image was taken, Carter would die of lymphoma, leading to stories that King Tut's tomb was cursed. China's Terracotta Army. A vast army of terracotta warriors belonging to China's first emperor Qin Shi Huang was discovered in 1974. It was one of the greatest archaeological discoveries of the century. More than 8,000 life-sized clay statues have been discovered to date. The Ku Klux Klan. This image was allegedly taken during a Ku Klux Klan induction ceremony in 1915. The KKK still exists today and is a harsh reminder of America's terrible founding sin, slavery. The fall of the Berlin Wall. The fall of the Berlin Wall was one of the 20th century's most memorable moments. The man in this photo would have been killed if he attempted to break through the wall just one day earlier. Lower Manhattan in the 1920s. Even more than a century ago, Manhattan's skyline was dotted with buildings that stretched to the clouds. The Spanish flu. Over a century ago, the world suffered a pandemic that was even more dangerous than that of COVID-19. The population at that time were also forced to wear masks, and they were just as unhappy about it as we were. The suffragettes. There was once a time in history when women weren't allowed to vote. In America, an organized group of brave women called the suffragettes worked to earn the right to vote for women at the turn of the century. Soldiers on their way to storm Normandy. One of the most critical points of World War II was the successful opening of a second European front against Adolf Hitler's Nazis. The brave men in this photo were some of the first to land on Omaha Beach, where fighting was some of the most difficult and deadly. The pain of polio. Prior to the development of a vaccine, some polio patients were forced to live their lives in a giant metal container called an iron lung. This machine allowed people with polio to survive, though their quality of life obviously wasn't great. The Hindenburg explosion. Long before people traveled by plane through the skies, they traveled via airships. Well, until the Hindenburg Zeppelin exploded in 1937. The ruins of 9/11. A lone New York City firefighter walks through the ruins of downtown Manhattan shortly after the September 11 attacks. Supplying the Mujahideen. A Mujahideen guerrilla holds a US-supplied Stinger missile, which was given to Afghanistan's rebel forces during the Soviet Union's invasion of the country during its civil war. Thank you for watching. Please do subscribe for more information.